The rain poured down in heavy sheets, drumming against the glass walls of the towering skyscraper. Inside, the air buzzed with the quiet hum of computers, the occasional ring of a phone, and the muffled chatter of ambitious professionals chasing their next big deal. In the middle of it all, she sat just an intern, unnoticed, invisible in a sea of power suits and high-stakes negotiations. She wasn't here to change the world. She wasn't here to be remembered. She was just trying to survive. But fate had other plans. He wasn't supposed to notice her. The billionaire at the top of the empire, the man whose decisions could shake entire industries, had no reason to look twice at an intern buried under a mountain of spreadsheets. Yet something about her made him pause. Maybe it was the quiet determination in her eyes. Maybe it was the way she held herself, as if she carried a weight no one else could see. Or maybe it was just that in a world where everyone wanted something from him, she didn't. Their worlds weren't meant to collide. He belonged to penthouses, private jets, and whispered conversations in exclusive boardrooms. She belonged to the background, to coffee runs, and long hours spent proving herself. But sometimes, the most unexpected connections are the hardest to ignore. The first time he spoke to her, it was almost by accident. A passing comment, a brief exchange, nothing that should have mattered. Yet, as the days went on, their conversations became longer, their stolen moments more frequent. She challenged him in ways no one else did. She wasn't intimidated by his name, his wealth, or the empire he controlled. And for the first time in a long time, he felt seen not as a billionaire, not as a powerful man, but as a person. But the world doesn't make space for love that defies expectations. Whispers started. People noticed. The media began to speculate. Investors grew uneasy. He was risking too much, they said. His reputation, his business, everything he had built. Was it really worth it for someone who was never meant to be part of his world? And then came the moment that changed everything. The ultimatum. The choice. He had always believed that power meant control, that wealth meant freedom. But now, standing at the crossroads, he realized the truth. Some things can't be bought, and some risks are worth everything. And as she stood there, unaware of the storm about to break, he knew one thing for certain. This wasn't just a fleeting attraction. This wasn't just a mistake. This was love. And love, no matter how impossible, demands a choice. The city never truly slept. Even in the late hours, the streets hummed with life cars rushing past, neon lights flickering against wet pavement, people moving as if chasing something just out of reach. But inside the glass fortress of his office, the world was silent. He stood by the window, staring down at the streets below, his reflection barely visible against the darkened skyline. His phone buzzed on the desk, another meeting, another demand. But his mind wasn't on business. It was on her. She was still at her desk, completely unaware of the storm brewing around her. The past few weeks had been a blur of stolen glances, quiet conversations, and moments that felt too significant to be ignored. And yet, the weight of what they were risking pressed down on him. He had spent years crafting an image, building an empire that stood on precision, control, and power. A single misstep could send it all crumbling. And she had no idea how dangerous this was becoming. The whispers had started small. A curious glance from a senior executive, a knowing smirk from a colleague. Then came the pointed comment, subtle but sharp enough to wound. She was just an intern, they reminded her. She didn't belong in his world. At first, she tried to brush it off. She told herself she was imagining things. But the shift in the air was impossible to ignore. Conversations stopped when she entered the room. People who once exchanged pleasantries now looked at her with thinly veiled judgment. She could feel the scrutiny, the unspoken questions. What was she doing that had caught his attention? And more importantly, how long before she was gone? She wanted to tell him. She wanted to ask if he felt it too, if he knew what was happening. But every time she looked at him, he was surrounded by walls too high to climb. He still spoke to her, still sought her out in quiet moments. But something had changed. A distance had crept in, like he was trying to protect her from something he couldn't control. And then, the rumors started. Someone had seen them together after hours. Someone had overheard a conversation that was too personal, too intimate. It didn't matter if it was true or exaggerated, the damage was done. She was called into a meeting with HR. It was phrased carefully, wrapped in corporate politeness, but the message was clear. People were watching. Her future at the company was uncertain. There were unspoken rules, and she was dangerously close to breaking them. She walked out of that meeting with her heart pounding. For the first time, she felt the full weight of what this meant. This wasn't just a passing interest. This wasn't just a distraction. This was something real. And real things had consequences. She wanted to run. It would be easier, safer. But when she saw him later that evening, standing by the elevator with that same look in his eyes, the one that told her he felt it too, she knew it was too late. Neither of them could walk away now. But they weren't the only ones making decisions. Behind closed doors, powerful people were watching, calculating, deciding just how much of a threat she really was. And soon, she would find out exactly what it meant to stand too close to a man who had everything to lose. The pressure was closing in from all sides. It wasn't just whispers anymore. It was warnings, veiled threats, carefully placed roadblocks that reminded her she was standing on unsteady ground. Emails went unanswered. Meetings she was supposed to attend were mysteriously rescheduled. The work she poured herself into was suddenly under scrutiny in ways it never had been before. And then there was him. He had changed. Not in the way that made her doubt what they had, no. That was still there. In the way his gaze lingered just a second too long. In the way his voice softened when no one was around. But he was more careful now, more distant when others were watching. And she understood why. Because it wasn't just about them anymore. His investors were watching. His board members were waiting for a misstep. The press had caught wind of something, and now reporters lurked in the shadows, looking for proof of the scandal they so desperately wanted to uncover. One wrong move, one moment of weakness, and everything could unravel. But the more they tried to keep their distance, the harder it became to ignore the pull between them. Every stolen glance, every accidental touch in the elevator, every quiet moment in the office, when the rest of the world faded away, it all built up, an unspoken promise neither of them could break. And then, the breaking point came. It started with an email she wasn't supposed to see. A meeting she wasn't supposed to know about. The words were clear. She was a problem, a distraction, a risk that needed to be eliminated. Not in a way that would make headlines. No, they were too smart for that. But her contract was suddenly under review. Her internship, once filled with potential, was now a liability. She was being pushed out. Quietly. Strategically. She wanted to tell him. She wanted to walk into his office, slam the door, and demand to know if he knew if he was letting this happen, if he was choosing his empire over her. But she didn't have to, because that night, he showed up at her apartment. Not in a car with tinted windows, not in the guarded, careful way he usually moved. He was reckless this time, desperate. And when she opened the door, she saw it in his eyes. He knew. They stood there, the weight of unspoken words pressing between them. The world outside was ready to tear them apart. Forces bigger than either of them had already decided how this story should end. But he wasn't ready to let go. Not yet. And in that moment, as the city stretched out behind him, the storm truly began. She stared at him, her pulse racing. The look in his eyes told her everything. He wasn't just here because he cared. He was here because something had happened, something that changed everything. He stepped inside, shutting the door behind him, and for a moment, neither of them spoke. The city buzzed outside, cars honking, people shouting, but in this small apartment, there was only silence. "They're going after you," he said finally, his voice low, controlled, but she could hear the tension underneath. She swallowed hard. "I know." His jaw tightened. "No, you don't." She thought she had seen the worst of it. The whispers, the cold stares, the quiet ways they had tried to push her out. But what he said next made her realize she had underestimated just how far they were willing to go. "They're not just ending your internship," he continued. "They're making sure you don't work anywhere else. I saw the emails. They're blacklisting you." Her stomach dropped. Blacklisting. The kind of thing that wasn't written down, wasn't talked about openly, but happened behind closed doors. A quiet warning passed between executives, a note in a file that would follow her everywhere she went. It meant rejection after rejection, no matter how qualified she was. It meant no future in the industry she had worked so hard to break into. Her hands clenched into fists. "Why? Because I exist? Because I dared to be in the same room as you. Because they're scared," he said, stepping closer. "They think you're a threat. That you could expose something, that you could—" He stopped himself, running a hand through his hair. "They're protecting themselves. And they don't care if you get caught in the crossfire." She let out a shaky breath. This wasn't just about her anymore. "What aren't you telling me?" she asked, searching his face. His hesitation was brief but there. "And then finally," he said, "they don't think you'll walk away quietly." It hit her then, the real reason they were coming after her so aggressively. It wasn't just about getting her out of the company. It was about making sure she didn't become a problem later. A problem for him. Because if she decided to speak up, if she told the truth about what had happened, about how they had pushed her out for nothing more than an unspoken connection, his empire could crack. And that was a risk they weren't willing to take. She shook her head. "I never wanted any of this." "I know." His voice softened. "But you're in it now." She could feel the weight of his words settling over her. She had two choices. She could disappear, let them win, walk away from everything she had worked for, or she could fight. But if she fought, she wouldn't be the only one with something to lose. She looked up at him. "What are you going to do?" He didn't answer right away. But the fire in his eyes told her everything. He had spent his life playing by the rules, making the right moves, protecting what was his. But for the first time, he was ready to burn it all down. And the people who had built those walls, they had no idea what was coming. She barely slept that night. Every time she closed her eyes, the words repeated in her head. "They're blacklisting you. You're a threat. They don't think you'll walk away quietly." By morning, she knew what she had to do. She had spent weeks trying to ignore the warnings, hoping things would settle down if she kept her head down. But that wasn't an option anymore. They weren't just pushing her out, they were making sure she had nothing left. And if they thought she would disappear without a fight, they were wrong. She had spent the last few years proving she was more than just another intern, more than just a temporary name on a company roster. She had worked late nights, taken on projects beyond her role, impressed people who once overlooked her. She had built something for herself, something real. And now they wanted to erase her. She wasn't going to let that happen. But before she could figure out her next move, the world made one for her. Her phone buzzed with a message from a number she didn't recognize. She hesitated before opening it. It was a screenshot. An email. And the moment she saw it, her blood ran cold. It wasn't just about her anymore. The email was from someone inside the company, someone high up, one of the names she had only ever seen in forwarded memos and company-wide announcements. And it was about him. She scanned the words quickly, her heartbeat pounding in her ears. They weren't just working to remove her. They were turning on him too. They had been watching, waiting for him to make the wrong move. And now, they had what they needed. Evidence, real or fabricated, that he had crossed a line, that his relationship with her was more than just an innocent connection, that he had compromised himself. They were using her as the excuse to take him down. She felt sick. She had thought she was the one with everything to lose, that this was just about her future, her career. But she had been wrong. This was bigger than her, and the people pulling the strings weren't just going to push her out. They were going to make sure he fell with her. She had to tell him. She grabbed her coat, her phone still clenched in her hand, and rushed out the door. The morning air was sharp against her skin, but she barely noticed, because the moment she reached for a cab, another phone buzzed a second message from the same unknown number. It was short, just 4 words. "You're already too late." Her hands tightened around her phone as she read the message again. "You're already too late." The words sent a chill down her spine. She didn't know who was behind it, but the meaning was clear. Something had already happened. She pushed open the door of the nearest cab and gave the driver his address. The city moved past in a blur, but all she could think about was him. Had they already made their move? Had they found a way to force him out? Her mind raced through the possibilities. She knew how this world worked. When people at the top became liabilities, they didn't just disappear, they were erased. Deals were rewritten, reputations were shattered, and by the time the dust settled, no one even remembered their names. Her fingers hovered over her phone. She needed to call him, warn him. But before she could dial, her phone buzzed again. Another message. "Don't call. Just listen." She swallowed hard, staring at the words. Someone was watching. Someone knew what she was about to do before she even did it. Her pulse pounded in her ears as the cab pulled up in front of his building. She didn't hesitate. She threw a few bills at the driver and jumped out, her heart racing as she rushed toward the entrance. The lobby was too quiet. The usual receptionist wasn't there. The security guards barely glanced at her. It felt wrong. She stepped into the elevator and hit the button for his floor. The doors closed, and as she ascended, she braced herself. When the doors opened, the first thing she saw was his office, his name still on the door. But the second thing she saw made her stomach drop. The room was nearly empty. His desk was clear. The shelves that once held files and awards were bare. The walls looked stripped, as if someone had erased every trace of him. She took a shaky step forward, her breath catching in her throat. He was gone. Her phone buzzed again, and she fumbled to unlock it. Another message. "Meet me downstairs." Alone. She turned, feeling eyes on her, though she couldn't see anyone. Her legs felt heavy as she made her way back to the elevator. When she stepped outside, she saw him. He was leaning against the side of a black car, his hands in his pockets, his expression unreadable. She ran toward him. What happened? For a long moment, he didn't answer. Then he exhaled and said, "I walked away." Her breath caught. "What?" He looked at her, something unreadable in his eyes. "They gave me a choice. Stay and let them destroy you. Or leave and make sure they never touch you again." She felt like the ground had just been pulled out from under her. "But this company your entire life?" He shook his head. "It was never just about the company. It was about control. They built me up, and they thought they owned me. But they were wrong." He looked away for a moment, then back at her. "I walked out before they could take anything from me. Before they could turn me into something I didn't want to be." She searched his face, trying to understand. "And what happens now?" A small smile touched his lips, but it was tinged with something bittersweet. "Now, I start over." She felt her throat tighten. He had given up everything for her. He must have seen the emotions in her eyes, because he reached for her hand, his touch grounding her. "They expected me to play their game, to fight back, to make this into a scandal. But I didn't." His grip tightened slightly. "I chose something different. I chose to walk away on my terms. And I chose you." Tears burned at the corners of her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. "I don't want to be the reason you lost everything." "You're not," he said firmly. "You're the reason I finally saw what really mattered." For a moment, they just stood there, the noise of the city swirling around them. She had spent so much time fearing what would happen if she lost everything. But maybe, just maybe, losing everything wasn't the worst thing. Maybe it was the beginning of something new. As she looked at him, she realized she wasn't alone anymore. And no matter what came next, they would figure it out together.